Hello and welcome to 310 The Left. It's presented by your New England Ford dealers. I am your fill-in host, Lou Merlone, and I'm joined by the great Stats Masterson, Alex Spear from the Boston Globe.
I'm letting you down, man.
No.
I'm throwing the whole thing off the rails.
No, TC's had a rough week. He had a little day off today, so the two of us are in charge of now running this show. But so you just got down here the other day. It's always great seeing you.
It's super great to be back in the sun and to be able to see baseball in this setting. You know what it's like, the opportunity to kind of drift around and see the backfields, to see the work to see and appreciate the work that goes into the preparations for that full season, and like the development opportunities that exist for players, and how year over year they get bigger, or they get areas where they've improved or maybe fallen off. I love this time of year.
Yes, yeah, that's what I love about spring training. I think we feel like we're both in the same category, right? Like I could sit and watch Devers and Story take BP, but part of me kind of sometimes wants to peek on the young kids that I haven't seen, that I just hear about. You see a lot of those prospects more than I do, right? But that's what I enjoy, and that's just one great thing about this camp. We'll get into the kids more. But to be able to see the big three consistently, Justin Garcia, guys like that, that's what makes this camp fun.
Totally. It gives you an opportunity to look not only at the present but also the future.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means the future a little bit later in the season, and understanding, okay, how close does that dude look to being able to help at X position or Y position? Or, how does it look, what does the power look like? Is it what you've what's been rumored, or is it just, or was that just a myth that maybe a few evaluators got a little bit ahead of themselves? They were over their skis in terms of the reality of how a guy hits the ball. So, I think that this is, and then you're able to peer into the future of, I actually was just talking with Rafael Devers yesterday, thinking back to looking at him in camp in 2015 and the work that he was doing at third base back then, and what he had to do in order to kind of fight to stay at the position 10 years ago, and how that's informed what he's still doing now. So, I think that it's such an insightful opportunity if you kind of know where to look.
Let's get into the reason why he is fighting for that position, because I was down here, and about 36 hours later, they announced that Alex Bregman had signed his deal. It's 3 years, 120. We know there's opt-outs after year one, year two. I'm curious because I know you're tied in. You followed this thing all winter long, all off season, and I would say that 24 to 48 hours before this thing happened, I was being told by a lot of people in the know that they've almost moved on. They didn't think it was going to happen, and Durant's throwing his glove at me, and they were focusing on Arenado. Next thing I know, middle of the night, I see that Alex Bregman signs his contract. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised at the time. I think in the roughly 24 hours before that, it had felt like there was more heat that was coming from Arenado, and that they were re-engaging with St. Louis. I do think that there were kind of framework discussions that had gotten reasonably far along. I don't think that they had the specifics of a deal in place, but I think that there was a pretty clear understanding that they could get an Arenado deal done if Bregman didn't come together, right. And they were starting to think, yeah, it's probably, we were hearing about 6-year offers for Bregman, both from the Astros, and then of course we came to find out that there was 6 and 171 on the table from the Tigers, granted with some deferrals, but yeah, so it was hard to imagine Bregman not holding out for 6 years, and so to see it come together, boom, here's 3 years with a massive guarantee, even though some of it's deferred. So, there's a little bit of fudging of numbers, but I was very surprised at the moment that it happened, I would say.
Yeah, and you could see the excitement down here, and I would say, I was excited to see a guy like Alex Bregman. He has far exceeded my expectations just being with him for a week, seeing the impact he has with not just the young kids. I talk about that a lot. The veterans, you know what I mean? A guy like Durant just walking by, let's face it, it's been 2 years as an everyday player. He's looking to have those discussions about baseball and hitting and situations, and I think he has exceeded those expectations. He checks so many boxes. I know one fan's back home, he checked the box of, are we ever going to spend again, right? But the right-handed bat, the leadership, the gold glove defense, I'm really looking forward to watching this guy play.
It was one of the things that was interesting to me this offseason was not only identifying the various holes that he would be able to address, right? Like the ability, upgrading infield defense, whether that ends up being at second base or third base, based on the idea that there is a potential versatility there, veteran leadership and experience, right-handed hitter who's able to pull the ball in the air at Fenway, but also someone who's going to be able to put the ball in play and have that kind of competitive at-bat. There's a lot going on there. People who were around him in Houston love him. There was a reason why the Astros did have 6 years on the table for him and why they were willing to commit to the guy until he's 36 years old. And let's face it, this is not an era that is kind to 36-year-old players, right? Like in this era of mega velocity, it is hard to continue to be, to perform at a standout level. You're taking a lot of risk if you're willing to sign a player into and kind of to the far side, even of his mid-30s at this point. But the Astros, who know him better than anyone else, were willing to do that, not only because he was an identifiable face of the franchise's greatest run of success, along with Altuve, but also because they have such great respect for his ability to be an impact contributor, to be a leader, and to be able to figure stuff out. There's also the baseball IQ is off the charts great. The desire to be a great baseball player and to pay attention to those details is spectacular. So yes, you are 100% right in my mind. He brings a lot to the table that the Red Sox can really use as they try to move forward.
And when we start diving into where he is going to play, that's been a big topic of discussion. The way I look at it is it's a perfect situation, okay? Because as of right now, in my mind, I would have him at second, I would have Devers at third. If a kid, meaning like Grissom or Campbell, comes in and shows that he's ready, maybe they can do that in 4 weeks, I don't know, or maybe they already think it and they just want to make sure there aren't any hiccups. If a young kid proves he's ready for the big leagues, that's when it's time for him to play in the big leagues. Last couple of years we've seen guys like Cedon. Let's face it, they were just like, listen, he's going to learn at this level. We know what he is. He's not a finished product. But where we are as an organization right now, we need for him to play and learn at the big league level. Mm-hmm. I don't think this team is at that phase. This is a playoff team right now. So I don't want someone learning at this level. If somebody they feel like is confident enough to play defense, I think both guys will be able to hit, then I think you make that move and he goes over to third base. And to me, I think that's the way it should be.
There's a lot there. So, I would love to hear more about your view of Bregman at second base and whether or not, in the viability of that, whether or not there are any areas that you wonder about, because I have yet to see it, right? Yeah. We talked to Alex Core today. He said at one point he will get into a game at second base. For right now, he's getting into another spring training game at third base. But with the young players, the future core, they will learn at the major league level. There is no longer the guy who comes to the big leagues as a finished product, right? Yeah. Both because the pace going through the minors is accelerated, there's less time to learn in the minor leagues, and frankly, the way that they develop players, on kind of some of those specific points of the game, the development is there's going to be a remaining raw component to players when they get to the big leagues. It's part of the reason why so much of what Craig Breslow has done since he came over as chief baseball officer has been to focus on building systems and processes to help players develop once they do get to the big leagues. So last year, for instance, they instituted programming where they would have weekly meetings to discuss a few pitchers, a few hitters, so that they could have formal development structures of this is what we need to address now, this is what we need to address this week. And this year they've added a major league director of development, which is something we're used to seeing player development being a minor league thing. This year they've added to the staff a director of development in the big leagues in order to have someone kind of overseeing what are the developmental needs of our young players. So there is going to be a fair amount of learning on the fly, but I think that, to your point, that you do want to have a higher bar, a higher threshold for when you bring players up. Yeah. Right?
And I think they want Bregman at third. Yeah. You know what I mean? They want one of these kids to win the job, right? Which kind of brings us to Rafael Devers, right? We heard the initial comments, were you willing to DH? No. The famous quotes. Now, yesterday he talked in his locker, and I think he softened it a little bit, but he still came, I don't know if you were there or not, so I would love your take on it, but to me it still was, we are a winning team, it'll all work out, but by the way, I do play third.
Yeah, Chris Cotillo of Mass Live talked with him for a bit, and then I talked to him for a bit about that third base question and about, referencing those backfields days of taking ground balls at third 10 years ago, and he said, I've had to compete and fight to be a third baseman every year of my career. So, like, of course, that's my mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like, the reason why he's been a third baseman in the big leagues this long is because he's never allowed himself to think that he's not a third baseman in the big leagues. Right? Like, if he had doubted himself, then there were enough people who were willing to join in that doubt train that he would be veering off to a different part of the diamond in all likelihood. So yes, he still views himself as a third baseman. He said, do I see myself as a third baseman? I am so excited about this team. Love having Bregman here. Love what he brings as a winning player to this organization. I'm excited about however long he's going to be in Boston. I'm excited about being on the same team and chasing after the same thing. But do I see myself as a third baseman for the Red Sox this year? Yes. But then I asked him, so if Alex Cora approached you towards the end of spring training and said, Rafi, I think that we're a better team if you aren't at third base, how would you be open to that discussion? And he said, I don't like to think about hypotheticals. I like to think about what's in front of me.
Yep.
I'm a third baseman right now. That's what I'm focusing on. But if, I have great communication with Alex Cora. So, if he wants to, talk to me at some point, then we can talk. But, it's important. Third base is part of his playing identity.
Yeah.
It's hard for guys to give that up, particularly in spring training. I talked about this with Xander Bogaerts last year in San Diego, right? And Xander was thrown off guard a little bit because instead of working out at second base last offseason, he got to spring training and the Padres met with him there on the first day of spring training and said, hey, we think we'd like to have, Kim at shortstop and you to be a second baseman. And how do you feel about that? And Xander was thrown off by that, right? So it's pride, and it's also just wrapping your head around it when you've never had an opportunity to prepare yourself at a position that you've never played.
Yeah, and I kind of almost like a Rafi defender, even though I know that there's limitations there, right? It's sort of like Xander, right? Xander would play a solid shortstop, but everybody look at the range. And this is where you have to look at when you use Rafi Devers, the range. Because everybody just wants to point to the errors. Led the American League in errors. Well, there's only 5 qualified third basemen in the American League. And last I checked, I don't want Josh Rojas or Michael Garcia at third. So it's he, Bregman, and Ramirez. You know, and I put myself in his shoes. He made 19 errors the year before. He's made over 20 errors 3 times. In 2020, he had 14 and limited 60 games.
What a mess.
He has been a mess. Last year he had 12.
Yeah,
it's one of his career lows. So in his mind, I put work in. They challenged me, and I had a better year at third. Give me another opportunity to even build off of that. So I get it.
Yeah,
but we also know that there are limitations in range. We know that Bregman's a better third baseman. And by the way, I saw Alex Bregman at second base take 5 ground balls and turn double plays at second, finishing them. And he turned them better than anybody we saw.
Really?
Yeah, and to me, it's like I just saw that, and I'm like, I don't know about the range at second. But as far as footwork at second base, it looked really easy. So
the reason why he's not a middle infielder had nothing to do with his abilities as a middle infielder, right? Yeah. He was a shortstop coming through the Astros system. There was a guy named Correa who was already up in the big leagues.
Another guy, Altuve.
Pretty good. Another guy, Altuve, at second base, pretty good. So, the guy who's forcing his way to the big leagues. To your point, the one who forces his way to the big leagues, right? Like, you're not giving him a preordained position. He forced his way into the Astros lineup in 2016, and he was able. And it was a credit to his baseball IQ and adaptability, traits that allow him to consider second base now, that allowed him to go to third base after a relative crash course.
And that's one of the things too. You've seen it before, right? The college shortstop, the high school shortstop. You hear all the time, Jaron Duran played second in college or high school, and it's like, okay, but the minute they get drafted, that shortstop goes right to third, or that shortstop goes right to left, or that shortstop goes right to right. This is a kid that was a shortstop at AAA. Yep. He was a shortstop prospect.
And even in the big leagues at times when Correa was injured.
Yeah, so wherever he ends up, but I think ideally, if Devers can DH, and it gets us into another discussion, which we will get into a little bit later. That's Alex Spear. I am Lou Merlone, and don't forget, stream the entire Sox season with NESN 360's annual plan, available on the all-new reduced price. There's $20 a month paid annually. For a limited time, you get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit NESN360.com. Sign up today. We'll be right back, get more into the rotation when we come back. 3:10 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Coming up next. Welcome back to 310 The Left. Lou Merlone here with Alex Spear. And Alex, they avoided a little bit of scare yesterday. I'm getting into this rotation a little. While the team was up north playing, Walker Buehler was back here throwing live BP and caught a line drive off his throwing hand. It was his last pitch of the inning, so he left the field with trainers, but then came back and finished it, so they sort of dodged a bullet. But it just, all this talk of six-man rotation coming into spring training, you're sort of looking at it right now.
Right, it's going to be a three-man rotation.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Walker Buehler, I mean, obviously Garrett Crochet was the headliner, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have that ace. Walker Buehler's that high-ceiling guy. Health is a concern. Then you come down to Houck, Bayo, Giolito, Cutter Crawford. So you walked in here with a six-man rotation, but it seems like Cutter Crawford's in some trouble here for opening day, right? Dealing with some patella tendonitis. So now you're down to 5.
Right.
So it's you're trying to keep all these guys healthy. Right? You love your depth, but as a lot of teams find out in spring training, this is where the concern is.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to figure out whether or not their commitment to a six-man rotation is philosophical or whether or not it's personnel.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're seeing a bunch of teams really think long and hard about committing as a matter of course to like never having a starting pitcher start on fewer than 5 days of rest. Mm-hmm. And the Red Sox don't have a lot of off days early in the calendar, so so would they with Crawford on the injured list presumably to start the season, would they have a Richard Fitz in the rotation to start the season, or would they go with the 5 other guys, assuming that they're healthy, which there's some time to figure out whether or not that is not a guarantee that that those other 5 are going to be healthy to open the year.
Let's start with Garrett Crochet. Obviously, the big trade in the offseason, exactly what they're looking for. 25-year-old guy. Last year, we know what the season was. There were some limitations because he had thrown 12 and 2/3 innings, really the 2 previous years. Came in as a starter, was absolutely dominant. And then in July, hit about a 100-pitch mark, and you knew they had to kind of dial it back. But this is a guy that was desperately needed, especially at the age and the stuff, the swing and miss stuff. What is he going to mean to this rotation, in your opinion?
Oof. It is. He was exceptional last year.
Yeah.
It was actually a pretty interesting exercise. I was a Cy Young voter last year, and I really struggled with where Crochet should slot because of his innings limits, which also led me to a question about whether or not I could vote for Class A, given that do I embrace voting for but Crochet was so good, so overwhelming. The ERA doesn't necessarily show up because the White Sox, as they were in every facet of the game, bad defensively, right? So he was betrayed a lot by the guys behind him, but the step forward that he made was nothing short of remarkable. Not only that he went from being a reliever to being a big league starter and had absolutely no hiccups doing so in that first season, but that he was a way better pitcher than he had ever been as a reliever because he was attacking the strike zone, figured out that the cutter is going to allow him to live in the strike zone and then expand, and then, the four-seamer cutter combination are going to allow him to work in the strike zone and then expand with the nasty repertoire of other elite pitches outside of it. I mean, this guy was Scooble just with fewer innings last year, and again, a different ERA in part because of some factors that were beyond his control. Yeah. But this is a guy who you would be thrilled starting game 1 of a postseason series. That's what he means to this. He is unquestionably one of the most electrifying pitchers in baseball right now.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was it's year 1 as a starter, so he's it was sort of like walking through it like, okay, this cutter in and fastball combo is really deadly against lefties, and my sweeper and this changeup. And then all of a sudden, what was it, mid-August or so, here comes a two-seamer I want to introduce with 17 inches of horizontal movement at 98. And apparently, you look at Fangraphs and stuff, plus I know you look at, was his most dominant pitch, and he didn't throw until August. So it's like, how does he implement that this year? I'm curious, usage against righties, against lefties. But it's just the stuff is off the charts. 5 pitches of 30% or more whiff rate. No one has that.
Yeah, and what those 5 pitches allow him to do is to not only, like, when you have that many pitches that all grade is great, then you can really have some great game planning, right? Like, you are able to say, where's the guy's hole? Because I have something that I'm really confident throwing that will get to that hole. Yeah. Good luck to that dude. Yeah. He's going to be like, he's going to be, there's a lot of guesswork that they have to engage in, especially when they have to be geared up for 98 to 100 as a baseline velocity, right? And so then when you're working out, and so then there's guesswork, but even if there's not guesswork, the pitches are good enough that they can still get misses if he's executing them or he's looking to get them.
And as great as he is, it's still 1 year as a starter, which is where Walker Buehler comes into the picture, right? Like, this is a guy that's won World Series. This is a guy that's been the young man on the staff. Then now walks into this clubhouse. He's the experienced guy. He's the guy talking pitching, talking approaches, along with a guy like Lucas Giolito that's been in this league. But Walker Buehler, to me, is the high side, the high ceiling guy. Now, 30 starts or more only twice in his career, right? So the injuries are a concern, but a healthy Walker Buehler elevates his staff even more.
Well, the 30 starts gets a little bit into how the Dodgers manage pitching and what we're talking about with regards to like days of rest. You're right, though, that there was that boom peak where he established himself in like 17 and 18 and was truly one of the top pitchers in the game for a few year period before he required that second Tommy John surgery that really set him back for a couple of years. But he is someone who cares deeply about the art of pitching. Another guy who has one of these absurd 5 to 7 pitch mix repertoires, and so pairing him with a Crochet is going to be really interesting in terms of how they kind of chop it up and think about ways of executing. Buehler has also gone through different phases of his career now because last year was very much a search for him, right? The mechanics that had been the basis of his dominance eluded him when he came back from Tommy John. And so, there was real struggle last year, but on the other side of that struggle, you had him getting to excellence in the postseason. And I know that, some people look at his postseason as being 2 really good starts plus 1 inning. His other postseason start, the one that didn't have the great numbers,
San Diego,
right, was 1 bad inning in which it was bad contact, actually, that ended up with some unfortunate results for him. But Dodgers people who I've talked to were actually like, he was throwing really well that game. And the fact that he was able to self-correct during that game and get them through 5 innings, that's a veteran, right? Like, that is the experience. That's pitching IQ. That's being able to have a diverse mix and adapt to what you have and be able to compete and give you a floor. So it's interesting because you say he's the ceiling guy. I think in some ways he's a floor guy, like from the standpoint of track record and just knowing how to make some adjustments that should allow him to be able to compete pretty well. Yeah,
and then there's Lucas Giolito, really another ad. I mean, almost like the poster child for unpredictable injuries, right? Because this was a guy that was a horse. One thing you could count on when they signed Giolito was we need someone that we know is going to give us 30, 32 starts. Last year's rotation was a little bit, young, and you didn't know you had that. And the next thing you know, he goes out and has the brace surgery.
I would like to take a sidebar here, good luck figuring out pitcher availability and health, right? Because you think about the Red Sox offseason of 23 into 24 featuring it might be time to trade Chris Sale because we don't know if he's going to be able to be healthy and available. Love what he can deliver when he's on the mound, but no idea if he can be, if he can be a reliable presence in the rotation. We'll sign Lucas Giolito, who we're coming off of a down year, but at least we know he's going to be able to post every 5 or 6 days. And Atlanta acquires Sale, saying we aren't sure exactly what his availability is going to be for the regular season, but we know that if we get to the postseason, he can slot into that postseason rotation for us. Lo and behold, what happens? Giolito 0 starts. Chris Sale makes a full season of healthy starts and then is available for 0 postseason starts. So,
it is. It's crazy. Now, Lucas is dealing with, he's a little bit slower here.
Yeah.
They've held him back a little bit. Did throw live yesterday.
Yep.
He feels like he's still scheduled here for opening day. But Bale's another one. Bale had some shoulder soreness his last week or so in the Dominican, so they shut him down. Now he's throwing at 120, 120 feet. I guess all the strength
scheduled on Friday.
All the strength stuff is fine. But both of these guys may still be on schedule for opening day, but neither can afford another hiccup, correct?
Right, which is an interesting thing because as you and I have seen repeatedly over the years, there can be a dead arm period for pitchers in the middle of spring training, right? And so based on where they are in their buildup, there's not a whole lot of margin for error with regards to when they would be available. So if they have just a period of, where you have to back off for a couple of days just because of regular spring training soreness or just like lack of bounce back as you're ramping up that intensity, then they might not be available for that first turn of the rotation to start the season. And so then you're looking at moving a little bit further into that depth pool, which is why the guys like Richard Fitz, like Quinn Priester, like Hunter Dobbins become increasingly important.
Yeah, let's get into those guys now, because you mentioned it. Cooper Criswell came up last year, and I thought did a fantastic job as a starter.
Yep.
The numbers are a lot different as a reliever, whether it was just not feeling right or not throwing maybe the pound in the strike zone like he did as a starter, getting strike one in there. But then you've got Richard Fitz, who the other day I had a game, Alex, and he was 97, even 98, I think. He was 94, 95, but the swing and miss was never there. Even though his stuff, stat-wise, stuff plus grades out, but the swing and miss was never there. Then Quinn Priester, who threw, another guy that they loved his offseason, gained some muscle. All three of these guys' depth. Now, that depth may be tested. Maybe one of them does join the team. They haven't had depth like that since Cora still. You talk to him, his face lights up when he talks about Brian Johnson and Hector Velasquez, right, in 2018. But they haven't had depth, and it's important.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring up those guys, right, because there was no one behind them. So they needed them to be healthy for the full season, because otherwise there was just you'd be signing guys off of, from whatever corners of the world in that 17 and 18 period. So you're absolutely right that they feel way better about where they are from an optionable depth standpoint than they have in a number of years. And last year we saw it, right? Like Criswell was a guy who did contribute meaningfully to them and was a real stabilizer in a way that I think surpassed expectations. Mm-hmm. But there was a period in the middle of the year where there was no give, and they had Houck, and they had Crawford, and they had Bayo kind of running on fumes, but needing to take the ball every 5 days because they didn't have that next layer of depth behind them. And this year, they feel like they've gotten guys with some big league exposure who now might be ready to take a step further forward. When you talk about Fitz, that 97 to 98 is super interesting, because you're absolutely right. There's good velocity to the fastball, and there's good physical characteristics to the fastball, as people like to say in the analytics community. But there's not deception, right? Which is why you don't have the swing and miss off of it. And so when it's a 93 to 94 mile an hour fastball, gets hit.
Yeah.
And it's also a comfortable enough at bat that the other stuff gets hit too.
Yeah, not to dive too much into it, but a 10% K rate, not what you're looking for. 6% swing and strike rate,
right? Not
what you're looking for. Meaning, he doesn't get any swing and misses in the zone.
Right.
This is a big thing that this organization wants.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, 97 as a hitter, you're going to make me now all of a sudden swing and miss at a few things,
right?
Because I got to worry about your heater now,
right? Because you have to start making a decision earlier, right? And so you're making the wrong decision more frequently if you're making that decision earlier. And so that's where you're making the wrong decision about what kind of pitch it is. You're making the wrong decision about where the pitch is going to end up. And so that's, to me, even if the 97 to 98 isn't a swing and miss fastball, then the other stuff plays a lot better, which is the Nate Eovaldi formula, right? Nate Eovaldi was 97 to 100 and was not a swing and miss dude at those high velos, but it did a great job of setting up everything else he threw.
The last guy we didn't talk about was Houck. I want to talk about him quick, because this is now. Last year, remember, coming into the year, he wasn't even supposed to be in this rotation. We didn't know if he was a reliever, a long guy, a 3-inning guy, a starter. We didn't know.
Might not have been in the rotation, but for Giolito's injury, right?
So now we know, right? And I'm curious what year two brings. And it's interesting because I look at Bayo, I look at Houck, and I look at Whitlock, what they were. Like, Bayo brought the four-seamer back to attack the top of the zone, change some eye level.
Yeah.
Right? The sinker, slider, changeup, everything was thigh and below, right? Knees and down. Tanner Houck is very similar, right? The sinker, the slider, the split. He's also talking about working on in spring, bringing this four-seamer back up again. And for him, we had talked about he's curious to see how it works because that arm slot makes it difficult for him. But he is also trying to bring some eye level back. Garrett Whitlock, as a starter, everything was down again. Mm-hmm. More of a sinking fastball. He's bringing that running two-seamer up and in the righties again. Mm-hmm. Again, another guy adjusting, wanting to attack the top of the zone. This is sort of, to me, the way this pitching philosophy has evolved. Okay, now we got through it. How do we get better? We got to attack a different quadrant, right?
Yep.
And you see all the adjustments already.
Yeah, it's the world of pitching is one of adaptation and change, and we're seeing it becomes a really fascinating project to come in and ask a guy, so what are you doing differently now this spring than you did the previous one? And across the board, Houck it's going to be interesting to see how this stuff does play differently.
All right, you want to hear all about Boston sports? Well, check out NESN's Daily Sports Podcast. Boston has entered the chat. You can enter the conversation by tweeting at us, by using the hashtag NESNChat, or an email at thechat@nesn.com. Boston has entered the chat. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else your podcasts are found. More from 310 The Left with Lou Merloni and Alex Spear right after this. Welcome back to 310 The Left. Lou Merloni sitting here with Alex Spear. And Alex, we talked about it off the top a little bit. The excitement not just with the big league club and what the expectations could be now, the prospects that are here, right? You've got the big three. You've got Anthony, Campbell, and Meyer. And then, by the way, Justin Garcia, another prospect here in camp, to me has looked very impressive. But these aren't little kids walking into camp, that need to add some weight and be more physical. All of these kids walking in here about 6'2", 6'3", 200, 210. These are men.
It's really, almost jarring when you remind yourself how what their ages are.
Yeah.
Right. So Roman Anthony, I think, is particularly kind of like the standout there because you would see him as a teenager, and it's like no, that's not what a teenager is supposed to look like when he's walking around on the backfields. He was, bigger, stronger, more powerful. So you were already seeing, at a very early point in his professional career, clear plus raw power that now is getting into even more elite ranges of what that raw power can be. He hit a ball 116 miles an hour last year. Yeah. He hit a home run 116 miles an hour. No one with the Red Sox was hitting a home run 116 miles an hour last year. So that stands out. Campbell is someone who has been incredibly diligent about the work that he's put in the off-season training in Fort Myers, really on a year-round basis, to turn baseball into a year-round profession.
Yeah.
And he's gotten much bigger since they drafted him out of Georgia Tech as a fourth rounder in 2023. Meyer's the one who's who's really you really want to see how much more physical he gets because he didn't work out in high school. That was not a part. Strength and conditioning wasn't really a part of what he was doing. He learned on the baseball field, which is awesome. I love that. I love developing baseball IQ, but it meant that there was going to be more physical runway. But it's probably also played into why he's had some injury issues that some of the other guys haven't had at this point in his career, just because the physical strength hasn't been there.
The fascinating thing to me is when you talk to some of the minor league guys, and they put these goals in front of them, right? And how quick these guys achieve them. Yeah. I start with Roman Anthony, for example. 2023, I think it was 216 batting average against lefties. Last year was 313. He hit lefties better than righties, and Marcelo's another left-handed hitter, but I think people forget these guys climb through the minor league system. In high school, you're not facing a professional lefty when you do face one. And even at the lower levels, lefties fly through the system.
Yeah.
So you don't really get a look at lefties until AAA, and even then, the good ones are in the big league. So they don't face lefties all that much. It is different. There is a different mindset. There is a different approach. And you put that on Anthony's plate to try to make the adjustments, and in 1 year, he hits lefties better than righties.
Yeah, very specifically, I saw him over a few game stretch, his final game in Portland, and then when he started out in Worcester last year, and I was stunned because he had a bunch of at-bats against lefties in those couple of days, including against a guy with big league experience, Colby Allard, in his debut in AAA. And the quality of contact that he was making against lefties and the quality of swings, the quality of swing decisions, I was floored because I had seen some at-bats that didn't look great against lefties the previous year, right? Because of exactly what you're talking about with that unfamiliarity. And so you're hoping that a guy over the course of 1 year might go from unable to make contact to just being able to survive against lefties. And instead I saw him hitting a 108 mile an hour double into the gap off of a lefty. And it's where did this come from? So that's a tell about how quickly a player is able to make adjustments, develop. That's part of how you get to be one of the absolute elite prospects in baseball. If you're able to learn faster than other guys, like be on that really steep learning curve, then that's exceptional. And you're right, they are still getting a lot thrown at them that they have never seen or done before.
Yeah.
Right. So like there has to be you have to assume that there are going to be periods of severe struggle. You should assume that when they get up to the big leagues, all of them are going to go through very steep periods of difficulty. Right.
Yeah.
Like we saw it with
Jackson Holiday.
Jackson Holiday is a great example. Roman Anthony's offseason buddy. Like he was the best prospect in baseball last year and was absolutely overwhelmed at the start of last year. And then after being optioned, comes back to the big leagues later in the year and he looks more competitive, right? And that's kind of a normal arc, and that's something that you should assume is going to be the arc for these guys. But man, they learn quickly. Yeah. So that's the encouraging part for the Red Sox about why they're in consideration, why they're in big league camp, and why their big league futures aren't that far off.
Well, it's a huge jump, from AAA to the big leagues, like just the talent level, the arms. I even say like in spring training here, we're watching these kids, and every spring training somebody hits 380 and should be on the team.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, who's he doing it off of?
Yep.
Is he hitting 380 off AA, AAA pitches that he saw last year, or is he facing a big leaguer, looking comfortable? And you know what I mean, like having those good at-bats against big league arms. But he's a guy, I don't know where he plays, like I know he's played some center field for the most part and started to learn left field a little bit. He's not Rafaela in center. He's not the Jaron Duran type athlete. But for the size, his tool is offense, and he's good in the outfield. He doesn't burn the base pass, right? Average speed, from what I understand.
He flashes some interesting things in terms of how well he's moved. Like he's gotten to like 4-1-4-0 home to first, which is like you're talking about kind of plus speed for a left-handed hitter, but that is not the carrying part of his game. And he's so you kind of expect him to slow down because he is big and physical, and he's going to continue adding strength and size along the way. But there's at least like you're not zeroing out on any of those tools, right? Like there's something like everything is at least solid. It is at least like respectable, right? Like there's not a part of his game where you're like that is a glaring deficiency, and then there are parts of his game that are exceptional. So I think that the general consensus is yes, he's played center field going up through the minors to this point. The likelihood is that it's a corner. Like there's a reason why Wilyer Abreu's availability in a trade was a subject of conversation this offseason. Mm-hmm. There's a very good chance Roman Anthony ends up being a right fielder for the Red Sox for a pretty long period of time. Or that he could be a left fielder for the Red Sox for a long period of time as well.
The other guy, Marcelo Meyer, right? Yep. And really, it's, as the injuries are the reason why it's so-called dip in prospect rankings, because he hasn't been able to get through.
Yeah, he was top 5 at the Futures game last year. Yeah. Right?
I mean, the talent, there's no doubt it's there. Just when these guys went to AAA, he was dealing with the back and never got a AAA game.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why maybe he's a little bit behind these guys as far as in camp with a chance of making the ball club. But the talent's undeniable. But again, Roman Anthony has shown that improvement because he's been on the field and he's repeated at bats. That's where Marcelo maybe falls a little short, because there are some numbers. There are some, kills a fastball, off-speed secondary pitches, recognition versus lefties. But again, it's because he's lost reps of not playing, right? So this is a big year for him in AAA, right? To maybe improve secondary pitches, recognition, hitting lefties.
By being healthy.
But being
First
healthy.
and foremost, by being healthy. Yeah, it's super interesting, right? Because if you think about it, Roman Anthony was drafted a year after Marcelo Meyer, and they probably played a comparable number of professional games at this point, even without even with that full season difference. And so, that's a huge development opportunity that's lost, particularly when you're talking about Marcelo Meyer never having seen the field in a AAA game. I think the talent is immense. I've gotten a chance to see him on a number of occasions as he's been coming up through the minors. Like, I just love the looseness and ease of the swing, and then there's some really and then he is able to those eyes get big on some fastballs, and he will destroy fastballs in the zone in a way that makes him pretty compelling. But the ability to kind of easily lift the ball in the air to left field and then to hit some screaming line drives to right field, there is a tremendous amount of talent. I am curious, what do you see when he's moving around shortstop?
Smooth. Again, another guy that maybe doesn't have that foot speed, but I think he plays quicker in the field. He's smooth. I watch him and Story play, take ground balls, and I think Story's just a little bit tick, maybe glove to hand, as far as how quick he gets rid of the ball at times. but you can just see it, and I don't know. I haven't seen enough of them, and that's why I love seeing these guys. My old friend Christian Forey used to call me Polar Express because I need to see it to believe it. You know what I mean? Like, if I read it or somebody tells me...
Jingle the bell for Lou.
That's great, but I want to see it. But what I've seen from him has really impressed me, really all of them in the batting cage. I'm not used to seeing young kids at AAA have loud batting practices the way these guys have. The strength that they have, the driving the ball out of the ballpark. They do look like big leaguers in the cage, and as you know, you can tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
Like you can
hear the difference.
You can hear the difference. So to me, his game is mature. His game is smooth. I love watching him down here. 310 The Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers. The other guy, Campbell, you talk about controlled violence during BP in the box. Like, offensively, there really wasn't a weakness. He hit lefties, he hit righties, he hit fastballs, he hit off speed. Like, offensively, there was no weakness. Once again, Polar Express in me, I want to see him more at second.
Right.
And that's it, because I talked to him, like, well, have you ever played second base for like 20 games straight? He's like, no.
Yeah.
He's played left, he played second, Marcelo goes down, he goes to short. And it's like, if he's your second baseman of the future, I want to see him there.
Yeah.
I want to see his footwork around the bag, because I understand he's a fast learner. He'll get it. He's a guy I want to see more of defensively.
Yeah, it's really interesting because everything that he does is looks a little bit unorthodox, right? Like his swing, like opposing dugouts last year would be like 100 pants, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some unusual attributes in terms of kind of the sinking of the body movements.
His sequence is extremely unique.
Yeah,
because the hips fly.
Yeah,
but his hands stay back.
Right.
So it looks like it's two pieces at times. Nope, not many people can do this. He does it effectively.
And does it without just swinging at everything, which is the other weird part, right? Like, because when you have that kind of a sequence that's not smooth, you would think like, oh, he's going to end up like swinging at everything, right? Like, it's not coordinated. Nope, the pitch recognition is really good, and the hand-eye on pitches in the strike zone is exceptional, which explains why his strikeout rate was really added to the overall prospect profile.
Yeah.
Like, he's someone who makes contact, and it's loud contact.
They're just so loud. I compared them the other day. I was talking about them in that clubhouse, and I was like, there's a confidence, they're comfortable, but not in annoying rookie ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they fit. People respect them because of their work. Forget about on the field how talented they are. Off the field, their personalities, they're even more impressive how mature they all are. I remember talking to Roman Anthony, and he was like, last year, 2 years ago, I didn't pay attention to my body. He's like, this past year, I'm making sure I get my sleep. I'm making sure I have breakfast. I'm making sure I have a good lunch. And I'm like, he's 19. You know that there's 28-year-old guys in the big leagues that don't take care of themselves, right?
Yeah.
That don't know how to do it until they're 30.
Yeah, it's kind of a generation.
It's just impressive
thing,
all around,
right? Like, it is I do view this as being it's interesting to see them coming up as a group.
Yeah,
because their development reflects changes in how player development works at the minor league level, and how training happens, and they're just following a different path that's gotten them to a really interesting place really fast as a group, and they draw strength from each other being as a group in the same way that it helped Mookie and Xander to be coming up together, and to have the Jackie Bradleys and the Travis Shaws around them.
Yeah.
Guys who had seen each other being very successful, coming as they were kind of going through those building blocks. It's really helpful for them to be together and to have a shared confidence that they've been forming together.
Well, always pleasure talking baseball with you, Alex.
I have a shared confidence that I developed from sitting here chatting with you.
It's always a good time.
Probably exceeds the one that I feel talking to TC. So
it's always a good time. By the way, the NBA playoffs, they're around the corner, and the big question is, will the Celtics repeat and claim banner 19? You can find out everything about the NBA and its culture on Nesson's basketball podcast, Hold My Banner. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever your podcasts are found. That's going to do it for us today. I'm Lou Merlone here with Alex Spear. 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealer. We'll talk to you guys next time. We'll see you soon. Have a great day.